Have you ever stopped to wonder what truly separates the man who builds empires from the one who spends a lifetime merely dreaming of them? There is an invisible code, a mental frequency that the great masters of history access to bend reality to their will. And what if I told you that, at this very moment, you are only one decision away from that same frequency? Imagine the scene. It is a freezing dawn in 1905 in New Jersey. The air is heavy and damp, with that metallic scent of coal that stains the skin. In the heart of the darkness, a man leaps from the moving boxcar of a freight train. The impact of his worn boots against the dry gravel echoes like a gunshot in the silence of the night. He has no luggage. He has no coins in his pocket. He has nothing except a gaze of steel that seems to pierce through the fog. To anyone passing by, he was just another drifter, a nobody lost in the vastness of industrial America. But Edwin C. Barnes did not see himself that way, as he walked toward the iron gates of the legendary Thomas Edison's laboratory. He felt no fear. He felt urgency. He was about to commit the greatest audacity of the century, to walk into the office of the man who illuminated the world and demand not ask, but demand a partnership. Edwin Barnes knew something that the science of the mind would only confirm decades later, that a desire, when brought to a boiling point, alters the very chemistry of our perception. He didn't come to ask for a job. He came to collect a debt that destiny didn't even know it owed him yet. Edwin Barnes crosses the threshold of the West Orange laboratory, and in that instant, time itself seems to distort. Imagine the brutal contrast of two existences that were never meant to touch. On one side, the sanctuary of Thomas Edison, the man who tamed lightning and placed it inside a glass globe. The air there is unlike anywhere else in 1905 America. It has an aristocratic weight. It smells of mahogany polished with linseed oil, of ancient patent parchments worth fortunes, and the faint scent of ozone wafting from inventions that were, at that very second, rewriting the future of humanity on the other side. Standing in the doorway is Barnes. He is a smudge of soot and coal projected against a backdrop of clinical perfection. His shoes, if they can even be called that, are deformed by the journey and worn by the dust of the railroads. His suit, which perhaps once had a dignified cut, now smells of train smoke, dry sweat, and the harshness of the road. His face carries the gray patina of hundreds of miles traveled in boxcars, between the cold of the metal and the loneliness of the path. Edison's secretaries interrupt the rhythmic sound of their typewriters to exchange sneers of pure mockery. The white-coated assistants whisper in the corners with suppressed smiles, waiting for security to appear at any moment to remove that error from the room. To everyone in that dome of genius, Barnes was an intruder, a statistical error, a beggar who, by some oversight of destiny, managed to slip through the gates unnoticed. But what no one in that room, not even the genius Edison, could perceive was that Edwin Barnes's brain was operating on a biological frequency entirely different from anyone else there. Modern neuroscience gives us the name for what was happening inside that dust-covered skull, the reticular activating system. This is the mind's ultimate filter. It is a neural gatekeeper that decides every millisecond what is relevant to your survival and what should be discarded as unimportant noise. While Edison's staff saw a deplorable man, Barnes's mind had deleted his own poverty from his immediate reality. His mental filter was so violently programmed for a single goal that he was literally unable to register the cold he had felt the night before or the hunger that rumbled in his stomach. He was in a state of absolute hyperfocus, where the only thing that possessed mass, volume, and color was the face of Thomas Edison. In Barnes's psychology, he was no longer a drifter. He was already the inventor's partner. The rest of the room, the laughter, the rags, and the smell of coal, to him, they were merely unreal shadows in a play he had already decided how it would end. Edison finally interrupts. the drafting of his diagrams, and looks up. He looks at that improbable figure standing before his desk. There was a long, dense silence, a silence that would have crushed the spirit of any ordinary man, making him apologize and retreat. But Barnes did not retreat. He sustained the gaze of the most powerful man in the industry with a disturbing calm. He did not look away. He did not falter. Years later, Edison himself would confess in his memoirs, he looked like an ordinary drifter, yes. But there was something in the expression of his face, in the firmness of his eyes, that conveyed the unshakable idea that he was determined to get what he had come for. I had seen many men come to ask me for favors, but I had never seen a man come to collect his place in the future. Barnes did not ask for a job. He did not plead for an opportunity to scrub the floor. He looked at the genius and said, with the voice of one announcing a universal truth, "I came here to become your business partner, Mr. Edison." Laughter exploded through the hall. But Thomas Edison did not laugh. Amidst the general mockery, the genius saw what the world always ignores, the cold and dangerous glow of the sacred fire of obsession. Edison accepted the challenge, but not as Barnes expected. He handed him a broom. The test had begun. If Barnes's courage has awakened something within you, this is your place. Chronicles Hill is your sanctuary of wisdom. To never miss a chapter of this journey and to seal your commitment to success, subscribe now and leave a like. This is the signal that, from today on, you choose the path of the masters. Now, let us return to the laboratory, where Edison's future partner has just been handed a broom. Edison did not give him a desk. He did not give him a contract. He gave him a broom and a bucket of dirty water. Imagine for a moment the weight of that bucket. At that moment, Edwin Barnes became the laboratory janitor. He, who had crossed the country with the certainty of a partner, now spent his days bent over, scrubbing the grease off machines and the dust off the shoes of the men he intended to lead. It is here that most great journeys die. Psychology calls this the valley of despair to the world. Barnes was just the cleaning boy, but to Napoleon Hill, Barnes was living the metaphor of cold iron. Think of your mind as a raw iron bar. Without the heat of opportunity, iron is rigid, heavy, and easily broken under the impact of reality. For it to become useful, it must pass through the fire. But Barnes's fire did not come from the outside. It came from within. While he scrubbed the mahogany floors of Edison's office, he didn't see a servant's reflection in the dirty water of the bucket. He saw a master's training. He was subjecting his ego to a furnace of deliberate humiliation to see if his desire was a passing flame or an uncontrollable wildfire. Every muffled laugh from the lab assistants who passed him was like a hammer blow upon glowing iron. The world tried to break him. But with every strike, Barnes became denser, more resilient, and sharper. Months passed. Then a year. Then 2. Time is the greatest enemy of mediocre desire. How many of us would give up after 30 days of cleaning bathrooms, while our dream seems to laugh in our faces from the other side of the door? Barnes's emotional pain was silent. It was the pain of seeing Edison have meetings with great investors, of hearing the clinking of champagne glasses celebrating new inventions, while he, Barnes, remained in the shadows, with calloused hands and a sore back. But there was a hidden science in this isolation. Hill teaches us that burning desire knows no such word as impossible, because it operates on the frequency of applied faith. Barnes wasn't waiting for a chance. He was merging with the environment. He studied Edison's habits while cleaning his desk. He memorized the logic of inventions while polishing prototypes. He was becoming Edison's partner in spirit, long before he was on paper. He protected his flame from the cold wind of doubt with almost religious vigilance. He did not allow the poverty filter to return to his brain. To him, that cleaning bucket was merely a temporary prop in a film that would end in glory. What Barnes was building was what Hill calls success consciousness. He was eliminating all alibis. He didn't say, "If this doesn't work out, I'll go back to the farm." He said, "I will win here, or I will die with this broom in my hand." The emotional impact of this decision is devastatingly powerful because it removes the fear of failure. If there is no plan B, the brain is forced to find the path to plan. Barnes was in the desert, but he was not lost. He was just waiting for the moment when the iron would be hot enough to be shaped. He knew that destiny has a peculiar sense of humor. It usually hides opportunity within the disguise of misfortune or temporary defeat. While the entire laboratory saw him as the invisible man who cleaned oil stains, Edwin Barnes was, in truth, being forged in silence. He was the fire hidden beneath the ashes, waiting for the first breath of wind to set the industrial world ablaze. And that breath was about to arrive in the form of a monumental failure by Thomas Edison. The West Orange laboratory was in turmoil, but it was not the celebratory mood of before. Thomas Edison had just launched one of his most ambitious bets, the Edison dictating machine, later known as the Ediphone. Imagine the scene. The genius presents his creation to his most experienced salesmen, men in impeccable suits who made fortunes selling phonographs. But as they looked at that new device, the silence was terrifying. The salesmen turned up their noses. They whispered in the hallways that the machine was too heavy and too technical, and that no one in their right mind would trade a flesh and blood secretary for a wax cylinder. Pessimism infected the laboratory like a virus. Edison, the man who had lit the cities, was facing a rare and bitter commercial failure. The mood was of defeat. The Ediphone was being stored in warehouses, labeled as a miscalculation by the master. While the great executives lamented, and the salesmen sought excuses not to offer the product, Edwin Barnes stopped his broom. He observed the machine not with eyes of fear, but with the eyes of the obsession he had nurtured for years. Here enters the great teaching of Napoleon Hill: opportunity has a sly habit of appearing disguised as misfortune or temporary defeat. To the salesman, the Ediphone was a problem. To Barnes, it was his bridge. He didn't see a device that was hard to sell. He saw the one thing Edison desperately needed at that moment: someone who believed in his creation. While all the cheesy experts spoke of obstacles, Barnes saw the vacuum that would lead him to the top. He understood that, in the market of success, you are not paid for what you know, but for the problem you solve. Edison had a trust problem, and Barnes had an infinite supply of it. Barnes did not hesitate. He didn't go home to plan for another week. He dropped the bucket, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and walked, with the same dignity of a king, to Edison's office. He no longer looked like the janitor. His posture had changed. When he entered the room, Edison was surrounded by negative sales reports. Barnes looked at him and said, "Mr. Edison, I know your men say this machine cannot be sold, but I know it can. Give me the chance to take it to market and I will prove you right." Imagine the emotional impact of that moment. Edison, exhausted from hearing no from his own experts, saw before him the man he had hired out of pity years ago. The drifter who had accepted cleaning the floor without complaining. Edison realized that man was not there for the salary, but for the vision. He gave Barnes what no one else wanted: the right to sell the Ediphone. And Barnes didn't just accept a sales job. He accepted the mission of his life. He knew that if he failed there, the broom would be his destiny forever. But if he won, he would finally sit at the table as an equal. What happened next was a phenomenon of pure will. Barnes didn't just sell the machine. He created a market for it. He traveled from city to city, sleeping on trains, being kicked out of offices, but never retreating. Why? Because he had burned all his bridges behind him. He had no backup plan. He had no savings. He had only the Ediphone and his word. Hill teaches us that most of us fail because we leave an emergency exit open. We say, "I'll try, but if it doesn't work out, I'll do something else." Barnes closed all the exits. To him, it was victory or oblivion. And it is in this state of absolute necessity that the human brain releases resources that science still struggles to map. Barnes was about to become the greatest salesman in the history of the Edison Company, not by technique, but by a biological necessity to triumph. The fire that began in a boxcar was now about to set the entire American industry ablaze. Edwin Barnes didn't just set out to sell a machine. He set out to prove that a genius's vision could not be wrong. Imagine this man, who months earlier cleaned the dust off the shelves, now entering the offices of the largest corporations in America. He didn't just sell metal and wax cylinders. He sold time. He sold efficiency. He sold the future. While Edison's expert salesmen sat in their clubs complaining about the crisis, Barnes was on the streets, turning every no into a step toward the next yes. He created a slogan that would echo for decades in the hallways of the industry. Made by Edison and installed by Barnes. Notice the audacity contained in those words. He didn't position himself as a sales employee. He positioned himself as the final and indispensable link in the chain of creation. He raised his name alongside the name of the most famous man in the world. Barnes wasn't just hitting targets. He was merging his identity with the Thomas Edison brand. In a short time, the Ediphone, which everyone had labeled a failure, became a resounding success, generating millions of dollars and revolutionizing the way business was conducted. Years passed. Time, which once seemed like a hangman while Barnes held that broom, was now his most faithful ally. Imagine the day Barnes returns to the West Orange laboratory. He no longer steps off a freight train. He arrives in a luxury automobile, wearing suits that would cost an ordinary worker's annual salary. He walks down the same hallways where he was once mocked. The secretaries who laughed at him now bow their heads in respect. The assistants who ignored him now open doors for him to pass. He enters Thomas Edison's office, but this time, he does not wait to be noticed. He walks straight to the chair in front of the master's desk. Edison looks up, smiles, and pushes a document across the table. It was the partnership contract. The drifter of 1905 had officially become the man who would make a fortune distributing Edison's genius to the world. Barnes was no longer the cleaning boy. He was the man who had proven that desire, when tuned to the correct frequency, is capable of materializing any reality. He had mined the gold of his mind before touching a single penny. Barnes's story leaves us a brutal and liberating lesson. Napoleon Hill observed that Barnes accumulated a fortune in money. But his greatest treasure was the discovery that a man can, literally, think and grow rich. Modern psychology calls this positive confirmation bias. When Barnes decided he would be Edison's partner, his brain stopped looking for reasons to fail and began scanning the environment only for solutions. He didn't see crises. He saw opportunities in disguise. Barnes was not a mechanical genius nor an heir to fortunes. His only competitive advantage was something that you, listening to me now, also possess: the ability to choose a goal and hold on to it until it becomes an obsession. He proved that destiny is not a matter of luck, but a matter of choice. He didn't accept the role society gave him. He wrote his own script. The fire that began in that boxcar didn't just burn away his poverty. It lit the way for all who came after him, proving that the world belongs to those who refuse to accept a no from life. Edwin Barnes is no longer among us, but the mechanism he discovered continues to operate, silent and implacable, at this very second. Step away for a moment from Edison's laboratory and look in the mirror. What you see is not your destiny. It is merely your starting point. The science behind Barnes's success is the same that governs your biology. Your brain possesses a guardian, the reticular activating system, which filters reality based on what you consider important. If you wake up thinking about bills, debts, and limitations, your brain becomes a master at finding more limitations. But if, like Barnes, you tune your mind to the frequency of an unshakable obsession, the physical world begins to reorganize itself. Barnes didn't have luck, he had direction. While the rest of the world cleaned the floor complaining about the dirt, he cleaned the floor studying the building's blueprints. He transformed his humiliation into a business faculty. He wasn't waiting for opportunity to knock at the door. He was building the door from the inside. Today's emotional invitation is simple yet devastating. Stop protecting your excuses. Stop keeping the getaway boat on the shore. The Napoleon Hill legacy demands that you take your current situation, no matter how simple or difficult, and treat it as your training ground for royalty. If you felt the weight of these words, it's not by chance. It's your internal code recognizing an ancient truth. Barnes's fire is now yours. What are you going to do with it before the night ends? Edwin C. Barnes passed from this world decades ago, but he did not take with him the secret he discovered. He left it printed on the walls of every company he founded and in the bank account of every life he transformed. He proved that gold is not something you find in the earth. It is something you project in the soul until the physical world has no other choice but to reflect it. The broom he held in 1905 became the scepter of an empire. The boxcar became a palace, and the drifter became living proof that the Napoleon Hill legacy is not a theory, it is a biological and spiritual law. You have just crossed the first great door of your sanctuary of wisdom. This is the birth of Chronicles. Hill, you are one of the first to enter these galleries of wisdom. But know this, Barnes's burning desire was only the initial spark. There is an even deeper mechanism, an invisible alliance that Hill called the mastermind. While Barnes was conquering Edison's laboratory, another man was using this second key to perform a miracle that medicine said was impossible. We are preparing that chronicle right now, and it will change the way you see human connections forever. Asterisk, the fire is lit. What broom are you dropping today for your future? Comment, subscribe, and hit the bell. Your legacy begins now at Chronicles Hill. See you at the top.